He's not too far from a bunch of the people that are there today. Summer League is in full effect, and I just got a text from Matt Barnes. He's opening in now, so I'm going to jump into some intros. Good afternoon, everybody, to those tuning in live from Las Vegas, as well as those from around the world, to the Brand Innovators Sports Marketing Upfronts coming in live. I'm Nathan Elliott. I'm the CEO of FrontRunner Technologies, the startup that has now turned it into a scale-up business where we're turning the windows of empty real estate into dynamic and interactive content around the world in streetscapes ranging from here in Toronto all the way to Tokyo as of this week. So really exciting stuff. And I got to say, I got to start with heartfelt congratulations to the entire program putting this together. It's been absolutely phenomenal. The intersection between arguably the best league in the world combined with some of the leading brands in the world has certainly been an education. So on topics ranging from sports betting to fan engagement to NFTs, I know it's been a certain education for me, and looking forward to tuning in more through tomorrow for sure. So I guess the question that a lot of you asking is, why are the three of us here? And it started with a call from Brandon Gutman last week. He knew that the three of us are into some pretty spectacular projects right now. A film project called Black Mark that's looking at races in professional sports. Our technology companies that are just looking at the world a little bit differently. But in particular, Brand was focused on the great work that Earl's doing, obviously in the media landscape and the coaching landscape, and Matt as well. So the lens when we go into this 25 minutes is to, two former professional athletes that are just trying to make sense of the world around them, where the media landscape is changing quicker than they ever could have expected, but they're doing something about it. So we've titled this episode, if you will, Transition Game, and specifically on how two former teammates, UCLA Bruins, they played together, had significant NBA careers, but transitioned to arguably more important and more impressive off-the-court careers that ranges from coaching, as Earl will detail, media, as Earl will speak to and Matt will speak to, as well as the social justice movement, which they're both at the helm of. So before I get going and as we wait on Matt, I'm going to see what Google has to say here as a brief intro on Earl. Earl Watson is an American professional basketball coach and former player who was just named the assistant coach of the Toronto Raptors. I'm super pumped up about that. He played basketball at UCLA for the Bruins, where he was a 4-year starter and named to the conference as a senior in the Pac-10. Watson played 13 years in the NBA and later became a head coach of the Phoenix Suns, the first UCLA player to do so, as well as the first NBA coach of Hispanic descent, and what an amazing accomplishment. Earl is a highly sought after in-studio basketball analyst who uses his on-the-court acumen to connect with viewers of all age groups. Proud father, Earl contributes greatly to the Black, Hispanic, and youth communities, and he founded the Earl Watson Early Childhood Center in Kansas City in 2013. Matt Barnes, he played 14 seasons in the NBA, was a world champion in 2017 with the Golden State Warriors. Known as one of the most outspoken and explosive athletes of the generation, he flourished in this sort of trash-talking, me against the world attitude. After retiring in 2017, he transitioned really well as an NBA analyst for ESPN. And in 2019, he teamed up with a former teammate, Steven Jackson, to debut Showtime's All the Smoke, which quickly catapulted into one of the greatest podcasts in the world today. Impressive features, array of athletes, including the late, great Kobe Bryant, and look forward to hearing about that ascent. Off the court, Matt also founded Athletes versus Cancer, which is in honor of his late mother, Anne, who passed away of the disease in 2007. And Matt is the proud father of 3, and 2 of his kids are making some inroads in the media landscape themselves, which he'll probably talk a little bit about. Gentlemen, nice to see you. Thanks for tuning in.
Hey, what's up, Nate? Earl, what's up?
What's up, Matt?
I know it's been a bit since you guys got to catch up, so I just thought I'd sort of break the ice and turn it over to Matt. Maybe talk a little bit about Earl, in a couple sentences. Earl Watson. I know you go back, a couple decades now. Just a few lines on Earl, and I'll have Earl do the same for you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Earl and I connected in college. Hard-nosed point guard, similar to myself. We butted heads when we first met, but now has been a friend for over 20 plus years. Excited to see him continuing to grow. I think his niche is basketball. His IQ is off the charts, and he was finally rewarded with an assistant coaching job that'll hopefully turn into a head job within the next few years. And as far as business, we're actually working on a project right now to tell Earl's story, his AAU story, and how he grew up. So we're also collabing on a business end as well. So again, great friend. Wish him nothing but the best, and happy to be working with him.
And one of the most dynamic minds in the game. Love tuning in, whether it's YouTube or et cetera, every time, Earl. And maybe I'll turn it around and speak to Matt for a minute here.
Yeah, Matt is a paradigm shifter. He's a guy who took everything that he experienced in his past and he put it into his present to create avenues of platforms of narrative and voice and insight and unapologetically speaking for voices of people who don't have a voice. Amazing father. He expresses himself in every different way, from tattoos to creativity to just genuinely caring about the community. And his voice is powerful. Anytime I need something moved on Twitter, I hit Matt, and Matt moves it for me. So that's my brother for life.
For sure. And you could see that. And Earl and Matt are part of an upcoming series, Black Mark. And Earl was just such a wellspring of insight on their friendship and careers, and just grateful for your time today. So without further ado, we're going to jump into it. And Matt, obviously we get an opportunity to work together weekly, and had an opportunity to go to the All the Smoke cast, I guess, in November of 2019, when you were really just getting going. You've now celebrated your 100th episode. So really, you've said in the past that the podcast space found you. You didn't find that. So I want you to talk a little bit about that, and just sort of describe the journey of 100 episodes and really what the All the Smoke has been done to really refocus you on the content creation space.
Yeah, I mean, it was really, like I said, had no intention of doing a podcast. Didn't really know what the podcast was. And still, to be honest with you, although we're upon our 100th episode, I've maybe watched 3 or 4, if I could be completely honest. But I just wanted a space that wasn't out there yet. I kind of feel like there's always kind of been a line drawn in the sand between media and athletes. And obviously, I've been an athlete my entire life, but wanted to, once the opportunity presented itself, wanted to kind of create a safe space for athletes to come and talk and tell their stories. And there was a quick story earlier today. We released Fat Joe's episode this past Thursday, and the response has been just overwhelmingly, this is our favorite, this and that. So I hit Joe up and just thanked him. And he's just like, to be honest with you, Matt, this was my favorite episode too, because you guys have created an environment that there's no hidden agendas, no gimmicks. I know you're not trying to get me to say anything that I don't mean or twist my words. It was just a real authentic, organic conversation amongst brothers. And when I thought of this show in 2019, that's just what I wanted. Again, I wanted a safe place where athletes, celebrities, and others can come, let their guard down, and tell their stories. And we've been blessed with some of the best talent. And I say talent overall because we've had athletes, musicians, actors, actresses in the world. And for some reason, we always get them saying, okay, man, I've never told this story before, but I'm going to tell you, so I really, take pride in that, in our approach and the comfortability we allow our guests to have, that they can really just let their walls down, because I never wanted it to be, let me stick a microphone in your face and get your thoughts. I wanted it to be a relaxed environment, maybe a drink or a smoke, and really just, chop it up like we would do without the cameras on. So we found a way to capture that magic that we would have inside of our basement or inside of our man cave and share that with the world.
It seems like the personas almost forget that the cameras are on. You look like guys that's, Steph Curry. There was sort of, obviously like a new level of just who he was that you just were able to extract. So that's been sort of a key takeaway. And really, do you think it's the authenticity and sort of just the ability to sit back on the couches that is the success? Because it's been described as more than a podcast. Like you guys say that, is that sort of what your big wins have been to date?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the goal was just to create a comfortable environment. And obviously, when you get a Steph Curry or a Kobe Bryant, rest in peace, a Snoop Dogg, you know what these guys are great at. Steph is the greatest shooter of all time. Snoop is 35 plus years in the rap game. Kobe was one of the greatest of all time. But I always wanted to show our fans the side of these guests that I know when the cameras aren't on. Again, like I said, that's just the side they'll show me. And I just think I have an ability. I think it was funny. I was talking about this in another interview. Nate, you and I can ask Earl the exact same question and get 2 completely different answers because of the way we'll shape the question or the way we can relate the question into something we have on in our lives. And I think I don't know how I came up with it, maybe just years of arguing and talking, but have a way of being able to form and shape questions to get the best response, a comfortable response, a response where you know that it's not going to be flipped, twisted, or used as clickbait, but just a genuine response. So I do, like I said, I do take pride in it. And that's one thing that a lot of our guests say is just like, I was able to let my guard down. I was able to let my walls down with you guys. And again, I think that's when you get the best content.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And sort of on that topic, Matt, as you know, you have some of the leading brands and some of the key decision makers in the world today. So those who might not know about All the Smoke or Matt Barnes, why should they sponsor All the Smoke next year?
All the Smoke again is a platform that allows people to be themselves. I think so often today everything is sugar coated or guarded with understanding. Again, all these amazing brands out here. There's a line to follow when you are able to align yourself with some of the top brands in the world. But I think there's also a way to be real and authentic and true to yourself. And I think I've always been that way. I've been unapologetically me. Like Earl said early on, it comes with the good and the bad, but it comes from a pure place, an honest place. And again, I just wanted to be able to bring that kind of atmosphere and environment, not only to our guests, but to our fans, because that's, some of the favorite stuff I do is reading comments. And when you hear fans saying, this is the greatest podcast, or I've never heard Kobe speak like this, or I've never heard Steph be so free in an interview, I really do take pride in that. And in a short time, we're coming up on 100th episode, which was released August 19th with Carmelo Anthony. We've been able to change the game in the podcasting space. We are awarded iHeart Sports Podcast of the Year. We are nominated for a few Webbies. So, oddly enough, two guys that were quote unquote bad boys or thugs in the NBA have been able to make a smooth transition and be recognized not only in the sporting space. And one thing I do pride ourselves on is we stand firm in several different spaces. And there's always been this, shut up and dribble or stick to sports. But I think now more than ever in the past few years, it's, speak to what you know. And, with my partner, Steven Jackson, leading the biggest rally march in the history of our country, with his brother George Floyd passing last year, we're respected in not only the sports lane, but the social justice lane and the political lane and social equity lane. There's so many different spaces, fatherhood, that we can intelligently speak to. That's why I always try to say, like, we're so much more than a sports podcast. I feel like, when they say sports podcast, obviously it's an honor, but I feel like that's kind of putting a ceiling on who we are and what we're about. We just want to bring great content, so we've just wrapped season 2, heading into season 3. We'll start a new podcast tour with a company called Light, where we'll hit some major cities and also provide not only a podcast with a big time guest, but we'll also provide an A-list musical guest and an A-list comedian to kind of bring a whole environment and an ecosystem to what we do, and also adding skits and cartoons. So this is kind of just the new wave of what content creation and how you get your information and how you get to know people. And it's really an honor in such a short time that, we're one of the people, at the head of the class.
For sure. And it's the idea of athletes just gaining their voice or regaining their voice. Like, Steven Jackson and Jermaine O'Neal just today on Netflix, it's the Malice in the Palace, this ability to tell those stories that have not been told from the true perspective or the real perspective thus far. And that brings me to a question with Earl, who obviously you're one of the busiest people I know, and arguably the most articulate voice sort of in the game. And you've been busy sort of on multi-channels. You work the YouTube channel, but you've also worked the traditional media channel. So to share your words of wisdom, can you explain sort of your experience on working sort of both the new age models of the YouTube and those more traditional, and sort of what that means on your understanding of content and how it needs to be delivered today?
I think we have to lead our consumers of the future. And for me, I watch what my children do, and they only watch YouTube or their cell phones. And I think that's where Matt has been able to produce a show where it's like, in your hand ciphers. It's not really interviews what Matt do, just speaking on Matt. He has the trust, and similar to me, I have the trust of people because we lived it. For me, I played for all the amazing coaches, and articulating basketball is really simplification and simplifying how you teach it. And I've been blessed to do NBA TV, Pac-12 TV, travel teams. I had 170 of them before I stopped doing them.
Yeah.
Put 500 kids into college, and I needed to transition. And being a young head coach and being around great coaches, I realized the greatest coaches are teachers. And I think that's kind of what you have anytime you have anyone articulating or producing content or, you know, any type of rhetoric for whether it's Matt on All the Smoke or me up, you know, NBA TV.
Mm-hmm. Like you're a consummate sort of coach, like you see that. And when it comes through, and I think you're able to align with audiences, you know, that make, for me, like who's never played basketball, just more simple to understand. That's certainly a gift. On the topic of coaching, you know, we know that in recent weeks, you've been named the assistant coach of the Raptors. Look forward to, you know, seeing you on the sidelines here. Was, you know, becoming an elite NBA coach always in the cards? Obviously, you were one that transitioned sort of well and did that very efficiently and effectively into the Phoenix Suns. And how did you sort of shift from the mindset of a player into that of a coach and to do it so quickly?
I've been very blessed to sit with a lot of coaches, and it started with Coach Wooden at UCLA, and I've always wanted to be like him. And I never thought I wanted to coach, but every stop along the way, I had amazing coaches from, you know, Jerry West, UB Brown, Larry Bird, Nate McMillan, Jerry Sloan. The list goes on. I started coaching with the Spurs and Pop. And one every stop is the greatest teacher is imagination. If you can have imagination, then you can almost create anything you want. You can manifest it and explain the why. And people start to imagine, and it's somehow amazing how it happens.
Yeah.
And I think that's been my greatest tool, always imagining and creating different things and seeing the game differently. And like Matt, when Matt does an interview, people trust him because he's relatable, he's lived it, and he's exposed his trials and tribulations, his imperfections. But we know all imperfections, you know, every masterpiece has imperfections. And it's similar to me. I lived it, my trials and tribulations. You relate and you get to where the person is in order to take them up.
Mm-hmm.
You can never capture any attention if you start about your accolades and where you are. You have to go to where they are or meet them where they are, and they somehow connect to you. And it's amazing what you can do once you capture the other person's attention and you both start creating things together.
And I think an example of that, I mean, you were in the news quite a bit last couple of weeks in Devin Booker, you know, who, you know, basically came out and said that he owes so much to you, you know, for your early belief in him and sort of fostering that skill. So that's the sort of an example of that, at taking down and looking through perhaps the rust on the edges and getting through to see the true talent that can be there. So that's amazing.
Real quick, Nate, not to cut you off. I think what Earl said is important, not only in sports, but in life, you know, where you have to go down to that person's level, gain their trust and bringing them up. I learned that coaching my kids who are, you know, started coaching them 4 years ago when I retired, and thinking like I'm a 6'8" former athlete, tattooed. When I look down on these kids, they're probably just naturally intimidated. So, you know, just kind of understanding your crowd. I learned to take a knee and look them in eye to eye. And all the stuff I've done in my past doesn't matter if I can't get their attention. And like you said, spark their imagination and relate. So when I say that too, you know, I work with, you know, troubled teens. I work with gang units, and everything that I've done, like I said, my accolades, my championships, my 15 years in league doesn't matter if I can't go down and spark their attention and gain their trust and bring them up. I think too often when you've accomplished stuff or you just get a little bit older, we have a tendency to speak down to people, and not in a disrespectful way, but just speak like they've been where we've been and accomplished what we've accomplished. And obviously they haven't. So to be able to really grab someone's attention or gain their trust, like I said, Earl said it perfectly, you have to go down to their level, understand where they're at and where they're trying to go, get that attention, get that trust, get that respect, spark their mind, and then try to bring them up with you. So not to cut you off, but I think that's just such an important analogy, not only in sports, but in life in general.
For sure. I agree. And I think it, you know, plays into sort of your sort of narrative of being misunderstood for a lion's share of obviously your career. You know, you didn't go too many weeks without a fine or a suspension or, you know, a TMZ headline. But, you know, you fast forward to, you know, this week, you're on a cooking show. And, you know, I got the, you know, the pleasure of doing a phone call with you as you were sitting on the White House lawn, you know, invited by the, you know, the Biden administration. And then a month before that, you know, the day before the election, flying into Florida with the help to, you know, try to swing that said state again with the Biden. How the hell does that happen, man? Like, how does that sort of change in relatively a short period of time where the now elect president of the United States sees that value of authenticity and truth and resonance with the populace?
I think that, you know, when Earl and I came into sports as kids through high school, college, and really the majority of our career, there was only one voice that was really heard, and that was the media. So however they wanted to spin the narrative on you, and I always say a reputation is earned, whether good or bad. So I did some stuff, obviously, to get a name, but before it was only what the media said about you, and that's all that people really got to intake on you. We never really talked outside of small interviews. And, fast forward, social media, and now super fast forward, we're in our post careers and we're able to tell our own stories, our own narratives, paint our own pictures. There's always been people telling our stories and granted, some of them have done a good job, but they haven't let alone walked a mile. They haven't even put our shoes on to really understand who we are. And
Right.
for us to be able to kind of shed stigmas of who people think we are, I always get pleasantly surprised when I'm in meetings or pitches and people and I have my excuse my language, but I have my shit together and I kind of see me talk and I start to win these people over with smiles and kind of a surprised look. And I think a lot of that has to do with social media because I was able to show who I was. Like Earl said, there's no skeletons in my closets. All my mishaps have been played out on TMZ, ESPN, you name it. I've been on there. So I've always tried to, obviously made some mistakes, but tried to learn from that. But just continuing to show people who I really am, the father, the philanthropy, the in the communities, the give backs, the foundation stuff, everything I do, I've been blessed to, play a dream career. I got to make a bunch of money putting a ball in a hoop. You know what I mean? So I never take that for granted. But now that I'm done and I'm looking back, everything to me has a give back component. And I think that people start to shed he was a thug or a bad boy NBA image and really start to listen to me and see my kids and how I interact and the things I do. So, but still, with that said, some of the stuff surprised me. Nate, I talked to you, like, I got a call from the Biden administration at like 8 a.m. and they said there's a private plane on the Van Nuys runway at 6:30. We need you to come to Florida. I'm like, for what? This is like literally the day before. I'm just like, for what?
Yeah.
There's no, Biden wants to talk to you because you have a certain demographic that, this campaign feels like they need. And I kind of had to pinch myself because I'm thinking, like, me, like the bad boy, the bad guy, the guy that's been in trouble and the guy that, is supposed to be a bad person. But the fact that, I was single-handedly pointed out, was told to hop on a flight within 12 hours to go, stand side by side by the president-elect who ended up turning into a president. Like I said, sometimes I still have to pinch myself because it's surreal.
Exactly.
And they just to piggyback off that, the foundation of us, we both went to UCLA.
Yeah.
So you think about the history of UCLA and how we were taught. We were taught to be paradigm shifters, from Jackie Robinson, Lou Alcindor, who became Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Arthur Ashe, Ralph Bunche. But we came in a time where I call us the Tupac generation, right? We're all tatted, right? We just deliver it differently. Yeah. And what we realize is people think the culture is a certain race, but it's not. When people say the culture is imperfect people. And there's more imperfect people in the world, really 100%, whether they believe it or not, than it is perfect. And the imperfections that you deliver your craft is attractive now. Mm-hmm. People are relating to your imperfections and how you overcome, and the mindset of resiliency, and how Matt could become that person. And the core of Matt has never been that person, right? And the same with me, and we all have these trials and these journeys that we take. And people are more interested now in the journey than the destination. And I think that's where we've been able to catch. Matt's captured that demographic in media and creating his own media lane that didn't exist for Showtime. I've captured that just through the NBA, being one of the youngest head coaches to ever be, given that opportunity. And we are running with that. But at the same time, we always, when we need each other, we call on each other to produce forward.
For sure. And I think it makes you relatable. Most of us, are going through, it's that sort of idea that, be kind because everybody's fighting a battle. And just sort of anyone that's going that sort of sees that, it resonates. And that's where I think sort of that uplift and uptakes is taking place. And I think that's what's made you champions in the social justice movements. Obviously, our world got turned upside down with George Floyd. And I know, Earl, you've played an important role in Los Angeles and in Kansas City on that front. And at this time, in the wake of the protest, we had major brands around the world that were very quick to lend their support and money, et cetera, to the Black cause to improve that. But there's questions as to sort of how that's going. Do you have any opinion sort of on that in terms of what you would do to educate brands to stay true to their word and really focus on sort of delivering meaningful value, to the Black community?
Diversify your decision makers. There's not enough money in the world you can give Black culture and you think it's enough. It's not. That doesn't work anymore. We want to see people who can hire people that look like us. We want to see people in the room so a brand doesn't have to come out and apologize for an ad that they put out that was socially, unacceptable. Like, we got to have people in the room who have different voices, and they're not just Black males, it's Black females, and it's other races as well, because we need to learn this. The cell phone and Steve Jobs created a true melting pot of the world. And never did we think that the cell phone with all the cool apps and the music and the FaceTime, and never did we think that this thing right here would change how we view social injustice. Without this thing, a lot of Black people do not feel safe. Now, whether we live to tell our story or not, we hope this catches our truth, because our truth needs to be told not just on a piece of paper by those in power, but that person who's actually victimized. And I think that's when you truly can have a movement in a brand. So when you come to a table, and if Matt or I come to the table and we don't see people who look like us with a voice of power, it's not believable. It's almost, I don't even want to be there, because you're basically gaming us. Don't game us. Like, once again, we went to UCLA. Like, we are a research institution, and we understand the value of having power.
For sure. They used to say that the power of the pen is more mighty than the sword, but now the power of the type on our phone, it's a weapon, at the center sort of the Black cause, and that's such well put. And they said if Leonardo were to draw the Vitruvian Man today, it would firmly have a phone or a cell phone, in grasp, for that very reason. So Earl, that's, significant sort of commentary for sure. A couple more questions.
Hey, before we go to the next question, again, not to cut you off, because I think it's beautiful that these brands do want to, make an imprint in our community, want to give back, do want to help. But at the same time, it's really like Earl said, it's deeper than the money, because obviously the money in the start, money is the start and the money will help, but it's really doing your homework, because a lot of these times these brands give these bigger name organizations all the money and say, you do what you need to do, instead of really finding the liaisons in the city, or the people who really connect dots in the city, and like I said, that goes more to the brands having to do their homework, because it's easy to give, for an example, Black Lives Matter some money, and you can think what you want to think about them. I'm not the biggest fan of them. Black Lives Matter as a whole, the statement, but as far as the organization, I'm still on the edge of the fence. But they receive millions and millions of dollars every year to kind of represent us in our struggle, when there's people in these cities, in these communities, that are actually doing more work. So again, obviously money is a great start. It's appreciated, it's needed. But I would ask these companies to take a step further and really do your homework on who in these cities, if we give this $2 million to, we know for sure that this is going to go to something good, because so often we hear these huge companies are 500 million, 100 million, this and that, and the communities don't see shit. Excuse my language again, but they don't see any kind of turnover from what these companies are offering. And I think a lot of the times it's because they're giving them to the bigger name instead of the best people qualified to really help. And then another point that Earl said is diversify. You got to have people that look like the people you're trying to help on at the table, because again, it just avoids a lot of stuff. We're able to help before you make the mistake. We're able to give you insight and sometimes you can't even blame people, because they're not us. So you can't really expect them to know us or know how we think, that just like, I don't know how another race, down and really thinks and what they really know, because I'm not that. So I can't, we don't hold that against you, but what we hold against you is continuing to do the same old thing and have a boardroom filled with everyone who looks like you and talks like you and acts like you, instead of adding a splash of color and pizzazz and, oh damn, he's a wild card, but he could really help us, and I think I've really found that over at Showtime, because I've been able to not only create the #1 podcast, now I have another TV show that I'm doing that they're going to launch at the end of the year, but then also been able to bring them business deals and kind of telling them like, hey, you guys are going this direction, but our culture doesn't speak to that. Let's take this small left right here and then bust that right. And man, all of a sudden now we have, 500,000 subscribers on Showtime Basketball YouTube, when we started, there was like 100.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? I think, again, it's very important to diversify the decision makers, because it'll save you some trouble. But then also at the same time, we learn from each other. We're going to learn from you. You're going to learn from us. And that's all we ask is, try to understand and try to learn us, because you're not us. But at the same time, try to learn us just like we try to learn everybody else.
Hey,
Yeah, really good
Nate,
point.
Nate,
Yeah.
we call that KYP in basketball. Know your personnel.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like, and on that topic, and I think, and you sort of touched on it, Matt, that one of the important movements that we're starting to see is Blacks entering into the boardroom, right? So when you have equity, invested sort of decision-making stake and a seat at that table, for the longest time, it was a fight to get in the room. And that's what Kanye's been on about sort of big time, right? It's about meaningful equity. And that brings us to my final question to you is, you've been a dissenting voice in a bunch of different industries where you've chosen to often take the path of least resistance and go against the status quo to stick to what you believe. And the cannabis space is an example of that. Obviously, been an advocate, a user for quite some time. And we started to see a transition, in the NBA, in the league, in terms of what that sort of looks like. Do you have any commentary around that? And specifically the question, why now?
I think it's great. Myself and probably a bunch of other guys are thankful it finally happened, because we had to pay the cost during our career. I was someone who, and again, not to brag, but it helped me. I came from a functioning drug addicts, bad neighborhood, violence, abuse, and I found cannabis at 14. And little did I know all the things it was really helping with. I just know it helped me focus, it helped me sleep, and it helped me do some other things. So fast forward coming up on 30 years later, there's a bunch of medical research backing everything I knew. So it's been a long time coming. And again, it's erasing stigmas. There was a stigma back from the 70s, early 80s with the Reagan administration that this is a gateway drug and it does this, and that. But just like anything else, used correctly can really be beneficial. So I'm just a huge fan and proponent of cannabis being an option, and everyone can consume it in a different way. To me, I feel like this plant can help everyone from children to our grandparents, with day-to-day issues and things that everyone struggles with. So, I was very adamant along with Al Harrington, former teammate of Viola, of really pushing the envelope with the NBA and with the NBA's Players Association, because so often they just had to take our word, and our word wasn't good enough. But then you start getting these institutions that are finding these studies and giving all this information out, and that they're sitting back like, man, those guys were right this whole time. It does help with information. It does help with sleep. It does help with a list of things, all while at the same time, on the flip side, understanding the opioid crisis in this country. It's the biggest crisis we have in this country. And, obviously we don't have to get into that, but, money plays a big part of it. But I'm just glad that these professional leagues are more open to the idea now and have actually done their own homework and own research, because I really feel like this plan, I said, again, it comes in several different forms, can really not only help professional athletes, but help the world.
Yeah, for sure. Here. And thanks for that, Matt, because it's been, many years in the coming, and obviously you're well positioned to have, educated commentary on that for sure. Earl, one sort of final question before I turn over to both you to sort of close it up. So we're at this sort of inflection point in terms of the media, where those, that are sort of generating it, are of our generation. It's our age. You have the Shaquille O'Neals, the Matts, you have, those guys. But you have this new crop of, athletes that are come in that have an intense media lens. I think you're in a better position than anyone, because obviously you're active in the traditional and non-traditional media space. But what is it like the youth that are coming into the space, a couple of years in the NBA, that are looking on, realities outside of the game and how to leverage those media opportunities to grow their brand?
I think media training is easy when you play in the NBA for so long, and we were blessed enough to play at a high level in college. You are constantly being interviewed, so you're constantly being prepared. And it's nothing like, it's one thing to go to class, it's another thing to actually be in the actual test every day, because anything can blow up with whether you say it right or wrong. And I think Matt is the trailblazer. I think network is going to take a back seat very soon, and everything that's not network is going to flourish forward. And creativity and authenticity is always going to be key. So be true to yourself. Understand when you're playing in a game as a player, like I can tell you one thing, Matt and I was privileged to have Coach Lavin, who made us create a 50-year life plan of not just basketball, but beyond basketball when we were 18. And whether we give him credit or not for that, it made us start to imagine and think what's next. And he put that in front of us early when we were just trying to find a way to get free food and hang out with the hottest girls or some of the coolest parties at school, right? And get homework in. So I think that is also key, like, you know, setting those seeds and envision, you know, putting those seeds in and understanding what's bigger. And if it wasn't for Matt, I think network would still be, you know, established. But now I think network needs to create a different lens, to create different outlets, such as what Matt has done with All the Smoke.
For sure. Well, thank you. And even I noticed yesterday that, you know, Barstool Sports is looking at NBA or Major League Baseball alignments and how to showcase that. So it's really interesting, and it's sort of this exponential change that is just changing literally before our very eyes. To conclude, you know, we got connected on a significant project that we're partners on, and that's Blackmark, that's looking at races in professional sports. And I know you guys have an array of you know, projects underway that's looking at the topic of race and sport. So as the final question, you know, why are these topics of looking at the Black experience as relates to sport more important than ever before? So Matt, I'll turn it to you, and then to Earl for final words. You're on mute, bro.
Sorry. I think the Black experience, not only in sports, but in life, has always been important, but it's just been swept on the rug or taken for granted. Even with the effect we have on culture, the world, you know, we move culture, whether it be music, sports, entertainment. There's Black people that are at the head of all that, but it never really resonated. I think we've always been entertainment instead of being the ones entertained. So I think we kind of been taken for granted from that standpoint. But again, you know, sports teaches you so many qualities that you can, you know, use in a life setting. And I just think it's important now that we not only, not the Black experience, but just everyone, you know, minority experience overall, because to me, we're all in this together. You know what I mean? We want to be able to learn from each other. We want to be vulnerable. We want to be open to ideas that, again, just because you're white and you're not Black and you'll never be Black, that you should take some time to try to understand how we live or how we've lived or our upbringing. And the same thing with on the other side, you know, I was fortunate to, again, be Italian and Black, but, you know, my first 9 years of my life, I was around Black, Mexican, Asian. When I moved to Sacramento, was the first time I was around white kids. And a quick story, like my parents always used to put me, although they were, you know, functioning drug addicts, they always had the wherewithal that how important education was. So they were always putting me in these predominantly 98% white schools. And I'm just like, yo, why can't I hang out with my friends from the neighborhood or the kids I play basketball with? And they just always put me in these schools. But what it taught me was obviously the other side, you know, hanging out with these white kids was the first time I ever ate dinner at the dinner table, ever went on a family vacation, ever had movie night with the family. This is all experiences I got from other white families that I never had in my household. So again, that allowed me to understand the other side. And I think today, as a 41-year-old biracial man, but identify as an African-American man, I thank my parents so much because it has almost made me a chameleon. And I'm able to move in and out of rooms and I can be anywhere from Compton to the White House and everywhere in between, and hold conversations that resonate with the people on the streets and hold conversations that resonate with people in the White House. So the Black experience, again, to get back to your point, is important to understand, but I just think everyone's experience is important to understand. And I think once we kind of take those blinders off that, you know, I'm living my life and that's all that matters, I think we really have to start understanding how everyone is trying to live their life and have a little bit more understanding of our neighbor and our brother and our sister. And will that eradicate or abolish hate? I don't think so, but I think it'll give us a better understanding and we'll be more sympathetic and open to everyone else's struggles.
Earl, some parting words on that topic of the Black, and obviously you, like Matt, come from a biracial experience, you know, at one side the Black, but also the Hispanic. So any sort of words of wisdom based on, you know, the life you've lived that for those listening in here today?
I think exactly what Matt said. He said it from passion, and we know we can always speak from passion from our experiences, but when you get into that room, people want to see analytics. So analytically, we know a couple of things. The Black and brown people, their purchasing power is very high. And then you talk about, you know, just analytics of people just moving forward in our country alone. The Black population is steady. The Mexican or Latino population is steadily growing. Every year, 1 million Latinos are eligible to vote. That's a big number. And when you really start to break it down and think about the Black experience, it comes from survival, right? So the Black experience is we come from this place of survival. So we learn to imagine and create opportunities because our life depends on it. And that's why we're able to change culture. We're able to push any product. We're able to create things that the whole world will follow, because it's something very intriguing and attractive about seeing someone survive and make it. And I think that's where Matt has delivered that platform through media and sports, and myself as well. And it's just the edgy part and the gritty stuff that we love that's able to turn lives and change lives and move product.
And I think one more thing too, I mean, I think Earl said, I mean, we are taught to survive. That's not living. Surviving and living are two different things. And a lot of people in these Black and brown communities never get to live because they're trying to survive every single day. You know what I mean? So that's why myself and Earl and our brothers and sisters that have chosen to use their platform to better and open up doors for our community are so important, because a Black man could be 80 years old and he never lived. He just had to survive his whole life instead of getting an opportunity to live. So that's why I think it's so important for Black, brown, Asian, whites, everyone to really extend that hand if you're fortunate enough to be successful, to really open up doors for our brothers and sisters. Because, you know, Earl's background was wild, and that's the story we're telling. My background was wild, and that's the story that's been told. But we could have very easily made a left or a right where we shouldn't have, and been a statistic on the wrong end. You know, luckily we're a successful statistic, which is a blessing, and that's why we try to pay it forth every day. But we you know, two people here definitely understand that our friends, cousins, other family weren't fortunate enough. Our brothers and sisters that we don't even know weren't fortunate enough. So that's why we kind of feel like it's our obligation to go back and help these people. The only time I'm looking down on someone is when I'm trying to help them up.
For sure. And it's that idea of moving away from survival to somehow being proactive. And I think that comes back to, you know, the nature of this topic of transition game. Obviously, you guys put together game plans. Some of it was unexpected, other, you know, just came to you, but you were able to now serve as an inspiration, you know, to those who tune in to your podcast, that tune into your telecasts, you know, and Earl now, you know, a new generation and crop of players, you know, to extol those virtues. So, you know, on behalf of everybody at Brand Innovators, I want to take you for your team. I know, Earl, you're in the midst of two-a-days, and Matt, you know, you're coming from the set at ESPN. That just speaks to, you know, significance of the platforms that you have to change the world. I'm grateful for your friendship and the partnership, and just wishing you a really great evening. So thanks for all you do.
Nate, appreciate it. EJ, appreciate you. And then all the brands, those to tune in today. Thank you guys very much. Again, you know, you guys have a lot to do and a lot of power when it comes to really giving back and helping these communities. And obviously, again, like I said earlier, giving money is great, but really understanding where that money's going and doing a little bit of homework before you give that money, it'll go a lot further. So again, thank you guys for your time as well.
For sure. Take care, all. Have a great night.
All right, guys.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Earl. Thank you, Nathan. Matt, good luck with the 100th episode coming up there with your podcast. Excited for that. And Earl, good luck with the upcoming season and everything you got going on this week.
Thank you.
Nathan, terrific job. Terrific job moderating. And to all of our listeners, thank you so much for being here with us today. We really appreciate your time and energy. We have one more day coming up tomorrow. We're going to be starting up at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. So we'd love to see you back here. And until then, have a terrific day, a terrific evening. And on behalf of Brand Innovators and our team here, we'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you.